Hi there, thanks for downloading this tutorial. I hope you find it really useful and interesting. It's one of the things I'm really quite passionate about, actually, enjoying looking at different patterns and finding out new and interesting shapes and trying to come up with new and interesting ways to play them as well. And this really does sort of fit into that category of playing, really. This tutorial is about looking at a couple of different scales, which both in their own right sound a little Eastern and exotic, but actually looking at the repeating patterns within them from a creativity perspective, from a melodic and harmonic perspective, and then looking at ways to superimpose the two together to come up with a hybrid type of scale. We're going to focus really heavily on creativity and various patterns and shapes that we can employ to make your playing more interesting. And then I'm definitely going to finish off with some different phrasing ideas to make your solos and melodic ideas more exotic and Eastern sounding too. So let me kick things off with an example of what I'm talking about. So let's dig a little deeper into what I was doing there, the kind of scales that I was playing and the way I was phrasing it and the shapes and patterns, starting with the first scale that we're going to look at, B Phrygian dominant. Okay, to start things off then, we're going to look very specifically at a scale, and then within that scale a mode. So the scale I'm talking about is the harmonic minor scale. Now don't worry if you don't know that scale, you'll see it actually on the screen now. That's the E harmonic minor scale across the entire fretboard, in fact the first 12 frets, and obviously it repeats after that. Now what we're doing, as you can see, we've got highlighted red some specific notes. They're all the B notes. B is the fifth note of the E harmonic minor scale. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to start that same scale but starting on the fifth note, and that makes that puts us into the fifth mode of that particular scale. So the fifth mode of the E harmonic minor scale is called B Phrygian dominant. So although the scale looks exactly the same across the fretboard, we are starting and ending and building our tonality around the fifth note, and therefore we're creating the mode of B Phrygian dominant. And B Phrygian dominant looks like that on the screen and looks like this as a pattern that you can play. So straight away it sounds a lot more exotic than straight natural minor or Dorian or the other minor scales that we're used to playing. And the reason for that is because straight away there's a semitone, like Phrygian, therefore Phrygian dominant, and then straight after that there's this jump of 3 semitones. So it really gives you an Eastern kind of vibe to your playing and an Eastern kind of vibe to the sound and tonality of that scale. So across the box shape looks like this. And to make that easier to look at in terms of the fretboard map that we've got on the screen, let's chop out all of the chaff and stick specifically to that box shape. So you can see on screen now, they are the kind of 3 note per string patterns, with the exception of the G string, which only has the 2 there. But you could change the shape to suit it for 3 notes per strings as well. It's completely up to you. What we're looking at here is just a way to traverse that scale pattern. So if you knew the E harmonic minor scale or harmonic minor scale, you've just got to figure out putting the 5th note at that B to play along to what we're doing today, which is the 7th fret. I'll count out the fret numbers for you. So on the E string, we've got 7, 8, 11. 7, 8, 11. On the A string, we've got 7, 9, 10. On the D string, same again, 7, 9, 10. On the G string, we've got 8 and 9. On the B string, we've got 7, 8, 10. And then on the E string again, we've got 7, 8, 11. And that's it. That's the shape that we're going to be primarily focusing on today. If you look at the entire fretboard in relation to the harmonic minor scale, then what you start to see, or just like any pattern playing, is you start to see patterns emerging. Now, if you've had a look at my tutorial on pattern playing, you'll know that I've done this with the major scale, specifically the G major scale, and looked at all the different repeating patterns that exist within it. And therefore you're able to kind of come up with more interesting ideas rather than just looking at the guitar from the box shapes that you already know, or even just the big patterns. Actually looking at it and looking for those interesting repeating shapes and patterns. Now, the cool thing about harmonic minor, and therefore Phrygian dominant, is that hidden within it are a number of repeating patterns. And one of the interesting things you can do is fish them out by looking at them on the screen. Now you can see I've highlighted a couple. And what we're looking at there are little diminished 7th arpeggios that sit within the harmonic minor scale. And that's the key thing, really. If you can get to start to have a look at these scales in like a fretboard map scenario, like the one I've got at the bottom of the screen, then you can start to map these little interesting patterns out and then turn them into something musical. It could be something rhythmical, like, or it could be something that you're going to do, you know, from a technique angle. It's whatever suits you, really, but looking for them is going to help you to come up with some interesting ways to improve your melodies, your compositions, your improvisational skills, and make you a little bit more unique than just strictly running a scale. You're actually looking at different ways you can traverse that scale musically. So let me give you a musical example of what Phrygian dominant sounds like, and some little shapes you can do on an acoustic guitar or just on your electric guitar to strum and move through them. And I'll be able to show you these on the screen as well as we do them. The first shape is actually starting at a B power chord. So we're looking at the 2nd fret on the A string, the 4th fret on the D string, and then the octave of the B on the G string at the 4th fret as well. And you can allow the open E and B strings to ring out. What we're going to do is simply move up that bass note up to the C. And because the A is part of the scale as well, therefore our open A works too. So you could have something rhythmical that goes. Do it in a very metally or even rocky context, whatever suits you, really. So that's a little shape that you can try out, which I use all the time. And then where your 3rd and 4th fingers are, switch and put your 1st finger across the 4th fret on the D, G and B string. And that shape should be on the screen now for you too, and you can slide that up to fret 5. You can play them all as like an A major chord shape. If you're thinking about this in the cage way, this is an A major shape up at the 4th fret to the 5th fret. So 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5. So they're, again, just repetitions of the same notes in different inversions. The next one is up at the 7th and 9th fret around this position. So we would start on the B on the 9th fret on the D string, that's your B note. Then we've got 8 on the G string, 7 on the B string. A little major triad, part of your major chord there, B major. So root, major third, fifth. And what we're going to do is to take that and slide it up. So the same shape, slid up, goes 10, 9, 8. So we've got 9, 8, 7, 10, 9, 8. So you could mix those up in a rhythmical way too. So you're taking technique and you're building your technique as a result of harmony, and I think that's a really important thing if you are a composer or you're trying to compose music, or even just improving your technique should come about as some form of harmonic concept, because if you're doing that, that means you're always doing something musical with your playing. It's not just strictly an exercise, it's something musical is coming out the other end of it, which is really important. So the last position for that, or another position for it, is just take that same triad but use a different inversion, and then you get, again, if you're looking at it from a caged perspective, then you're looking at the D shape. So if you know D major as a little open chord, just slide that up. Sounds like Looney Tunes, doesn't it? Up to 11, 12, 11, and then the same shape again, just a semitone higher. And effectively, we're just moving between the B major and the C major triad there. And what you're able to do is mix and match those, and you don't necessarily have to use all of those three notes on the fourth fret should I say, and all of those 3 notes on the 5th fret. You could mix and match, so you could play that shape, or this shape, or this shape, or this shape. It's whatever suits you. And here's the interesting thing, as you start to mess around with those shapes and all the patterns we've been looking at, what you're doing is you're building chords, you're building little harmonic, little triads, and you'll be able to work out the tonality of them by what they sound like. So whether they sound major or minor, happy or sad, whether they're augmented and have a strange quality to them, and that's just down to your ear. And you can get into the technicalities of that. That's not for this tutorial. We're not looking specifically deeply at the theoretical things behind the triads here. We're looking at getting them under your fingers so you can have some fun playing them. So you could build a piece of music to play over which uses these triads to create the harmonic structure. And it doesn't have to be on the guitar. You could have this as keyboards, keys or synth strings playing these kinds of triads and stuff. And therefore you've got this pad to play over. And that's exactly what I'm doing on the following example. So all I was doing there is I'd created the pad, created that all up backing just from using different triads and piecing them all together, putting a few little rhythmic inflections down with some some drums and that sort of stuff, and then playing over the top of it using playing that scale, which is Phrygian dominant, across the fretboard, using some of those patterns that we've spotted within it, the diminished stuff. And from a diminished perspective, if you've got this pattern here, then you've also got this shape, and each one of those repeats every 3 frets. So we've got that first shape down, which let me show you that. If we're playing it in this particular key, we've got 1 and 4 on the D string, 2 on the G string, 1 on the B string, and 4 on the B string. And you can sweep those or pick them, alternate pickups, whatever suits you. We're not looking at this from a technique perspective. And that, like I say, the next pattern, which is connected to it, is this note, starting on the 2nd fret of the G string to the 5th fret. Now we play with our 3rd finger the 4th fret on the B string, 2nd fret E string, 5th fret E string. So you can mix and match those. And both of these, as I say, move around every 3 frets. And they're all forming part of basically a bigger arpeggio that you can try and use. And so let me show you that shape, which is a big diminished 7th arpeggio. And that is 2 and 5 on the E string, 3 and then 4 on the A and D string. So we've got 2, 5, 3, 4. Then we've got 2, 5 again, this time on the G string. Then 4 on the B string, 2, 5 on the E string. And I'm hammering between the 1st and 2nd note, so hammer there, down, 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 hammer, down, down, hammer, and then a reverse on the way up. Pull off, up, up, pull off, up, 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 pull off, if you want to do it in a sweep. And then that pattern repeats every 3 frets as well. So you've got your Phrygian dominant scale as a strict scale pattern. But you've also got these other elements sitting within it that's going to make your soloing much more interesting. So now let's check out the other scale that I was using, which was Melodic Minor, E Melodic Minor in its 5th mode, Mixolydian flat 6. So one of the other things I did in that little improvisation is I brought in some notes that were outside of Phrygian dominant. And the way that I brought those together was by superimposing another scale over the top of the one we're currently using. And that scale is actually another mode, and it's a mode of the Melodic Minor. And again, it's the 5th mode. And this time we're looking at E Melodic Minor, which looks like this on the fretboard. And we're starting again on the 5th note, which is the B. So starting from that note, every B note, and playing the scale through gives you the 5th mode of this particular scale. And that mode is called Mixolydian flat 6. So we're in B Mixolydian flat 6. It's also known as the acoustic scale. If you want to go and look that up on Google, you'll find that it's called that too. Some composers have used it and used a particular name to coin it. But yes, they're both the same scale. It's melodic minor, so we're looking at E melodic minor across the first 12 frets and then repeating that pattern 12 to 24 if you've got 24 frets. And then what we're doing is we're playing, because we've got sitting underneath it is that B tonality. Then what we've got when we play the E melodic minor is B Mixolydian flat 6, and it looks like this as a box shape. Absolutely beautiful sounding mode or scale, depending if you're treating it specifically as a scale. Gorgeous, and it really has that, it's kind of a more subtle Eastern tonality. So if you think of Phrygian dominant as pretty harsh at times because of those intervals. Mixolydian flat 6 has got a little bit more of a prettiness to it. So that's our shape that we've got to play with. If I cut out all the chaff again, you end up with you know, a box pattern that you can work with, and you could come up with a different one. You don't have to drop down there. You could play 3 notes on that string. Find a shape that suits you. I like that one. It doesn't have to mean that you use that specific one, but you can pick and choose from that big scale pattern that I've had on the screen. So let's check out some of the repeating chords, shapes and patterns that sit within the scale. So if we've cut down to this one, just for ease of viewing, you can see that I'm picking out some little arpeggiatic patterns, and again, hidden within the melodic minor scale are some lots and lots of repeating patterns. And if you look at it as a fretboard map, as I said, with Phrygian dominant and the harmonic minor scale, then you'll start to notice these little repetitions, and you can use them to your musical advantage. One of the really cool little shapes within melodic minor is this little dominant sweep, which repeats there and there. So if we look at the fretboard map again for E melodic minor or B Mixolydian flat 6, then you can see here and here we've got these notes that we can employ, and they're just repeating patterns. So if you can get them under your fingers as either sweeps or just the actual shapes, then you're finding a more intervallic way of playing the scale and patterns, rather than simply just running the scale. So let me give you them as from a tab perspective. You've got 7 on the D string, 6 on the G string, and then 5 on the B string, and I'm just playing that down, down, down. And then I'm hammering with my little finger up to 8 on the B string. Pull off, back to 5, and then 6, 7, upstroke, upstroke. That note exists too. So we can go 5, 7, 6, 5, 8, and then backwards 8, 5, 6, 7, 5. And that shape just repeats a tone higher. So we're up at 9, 8, 7, 10, 10, 7, 8, 9, 7. And sitting above that is another shape, which I really like the sound of. It's actually part of a little augmented triad which repeats there. It also repeats here, here, here. So just as we did in Phrygian dominant, you can do some very similar things, but using augmented shapes as well. And then imagine mixing and matching the two. So that first shape, we've got 7, 6, 5, and it carries on. It's part of that wider, larger augmented shape. So on the bottom half of that, you've got 5, 4, 4, and then carrying on, we've got this little shape of 4, 4, 3. And then up here I played this little sweep, didn't I, which was 9, 8, 8, and up to 12 on the B string. So 9 on the D string, 8 on the G string, 8 on the B string, 12. So I'm just mixing and matching those arpeggios. And you can look at the scale and come up with some interesting arpeggios just based on changing some of those notes, as long as they're within the scale. And because this is a little repeating triad, then we're going to see it repeating elsewhere. So you can find it here. So let me show you that pattern. We've got 12, 9, 10, 12, 9. So 12 on the E string, 9 on the E string, 10 on the B string, 12 on the G string, 9. And then that repeats again a tone higher. So 14, 11, 12, 14, 11. And the great thing about that is it's part of an inversion of a dominant 7 arpeggio. So let me give you the full one to try out there, because then you've got both patterns to try. So up at 9th, on the 9th fret, that's the shape we're going to do. And if you've just done the diminished one that I showed you in the Phrygian dominant section, then it's only one note difference. So these are the notes. We've got 9, 12, 10, 11, then we've got 9, 12, and this time 10 on the B string, 9, 12 on the E string. So 9, 12 E string, 10 A string, 11 D string, 9, 12 on the G string, that's a hammer, and then you've got 10 on the B string, single note, and then 9, 12 hammer on the E string, and then reverse. And because we're talking about this repeating pattern, this whole thing works the same but a tone higher. So you've got some really interesting ways and shapes hidden within Melodic Minor, and you've got some interesting shapes and patterns hidden within Harmonic Minor. Okay, so in the musical example that I played earlier, I was mixing both of the scales together to form a hybrid type of scale. So let's take a closer look at that. So let's take a look at Phrygian dominance across the entire fretboard again. This time, let's now superimpose Mixolydian flat 6 over the top of it. And what you've got here is all the red notes are our root notes, are our Bs. And then we've got black notes which are representing melodic minor, or a Mixolydian flat 6. The blue notes are the shared notes. So they're the notes that are shared between Mixolydian flat 6 and B Phrygian dominant. And the green notes are just Phrygian dominant. And you can see we've just got an extra note in there. So they share pretty much the same notes apart from one extra. And so you can mix and match the two as you're playing. So if we turn them all black now, so you can see all the potential notes that are available to you. And now let's cut away some of the wheat from the chaff. So you end up with a shape that's kind of coherent and you can try and get under your fingers. Then you end up with patterns which are a bit more interesting than just this either Phrygian dominant or Mixolydian flat 6. And when I solo, I mix and match the two. And that really then, and especially if you're looking at it from the patterns perspective we looked at before, so you've got looking at all those different shapes and patterns, mixing them together. So sometimes you're getting some diminished, sometimes you're getting some augmented stuff going on there, and it really does help to make your playing more interesting. Now here's an interesting thing. If we've got this pattern, so let's have a look on the D string. What we can do is actually try and turn this whole thing into something chromatic, because if you look at especially Eastern music, it doesn't necessarily conform to Western harmonic structures. And what I'm talking about that is we've got this 12 semitone row, haven't we, in Western music? That's why on the guitar we have 12 frets, etc., etc. But within Eastern tonality and a lot of Eastern instruments, there are notes in between that step, microtonal stuff that you hear specifically on sitars and that kind of stuff. So if you can emulate notes in between a semitone, that goes without saying that we can use chromatic passages too. So try making that run on the D string chromatic. And if it's chromatic here on the D string, then it's chromatic there on the B string, isn't it? And there's nothing to stop you adding those notes in. So to finish off then, let me give you some tips and hints and tricks that you can employ to create a more interesting Eastern exotic flavour to your phrasing. Okay, so finally then, we've got loads and loads of notes we know we can play here. Let's have a look at ways we can play those simple notes, just a few notes, to make them more exotic, more authentic sounding from an Eastern vibe. Let's have a look at the interplay between two notes. Let's have a look at the interplay between fret 9 and 8 on the G string, which really does kind of define the sound here, doesn't it? Why don't we have a look at playing some notes in between those two notes and really getting into the microtonal stuff by using bends. And one of the ways to do that is to try to bend quickly your 8th fret on the G string up to that 9th fret note. And then to try and do it in a bit of a sloppy way. So don't be too accurate with it. Either go a little bit further than you need to, or not quite far enough. And what that's going to do is give you those kind of microtonal differences in your phrasing, which is going to make it sound much more Eastern. So if I'm really accurate, it sounds less authentic than if I'm inaccurate and going a bit too far or not far enough. And let's do that on every little semitone pattern that we can see. So you can see, you know, we're just playing semitone patterns within that, actually within harmonic, within Phrygian dominant. But I'm looking at ways to phrase it, which is going to make it more Eastern sounding. Another thing you can do is to slide from nowhere into a particular note. So let's say we're going to take the G note, the 8th fret on the B string. Let's just start sliding. So I'm just touching the string, I'm not engaging it. And as I slide into it, I start to engage the fret wire. So these little slides that cause some grace notes on the way in. So we're not doing that, we're starting from nothing, and just as we get to the note, I start to engage the fret wire, and I do it pretty quickly. And you can do it the other way as well, sliding away from a note. So you keep the fret wire engaged, but then you just disengage as you get up, so you're not really going to a note. You hear how it's changing the way you phrase it. You're not going. You know, it's a completely different way of looking at playing the guitar. It's much more expressive in an Eastern vibe. And the great thing is you can still pick out some interesting technical stuff if you want to as well. So we were looking at semitones, weren't we? So if we take this little semitonal run here, we've got 9-10, 8-9, 7-8. And then why not add a note in there? So go up to 10 on the B string. And it's the same. Same if we go up to the E string with the same pattern. And having a look at turning the E string notes into a chromatic run. So I wouldn't be limited by your scale choices. Having this kind of structure and looking at things in this way is going to improve your compositional abilities, because you're going to be looking at things in a very interesting way rather than going and looking at traditional chord shapes that you might have under your fingers. Actually coming up with interesting shapes based solely on these repeating patterns, and then thinking about what's actually happening to them a little bit later on harmonically. And therefore you're just basing it purely on a creativity perspective. You're not being constrained by any kind of harmonic current theories around harmonic structures or how they should be. Don't get me wrong, everything that you come up with is going to have an answer harmonically. It will be a particular chord, it will be a particular triad that you're creating, but at least you've come at it from a musical angle as opposed to textbook. So one final thing you can do phrasing wise is you can do tremolo picking, which gives you very much an Eastern vibe. So mixing and matching them all together, you can get a really interesting way of playing the guitar, which is going to make your solo sound much more interesting. If you've ever faced a solo that you're going to play in harmonic minor or even some melodic minor stuff, you can mix and match the two. You can take this phrasing and employ it there, and I think it'll just make, regardless of the style of music you play, whether it's metal, whether it's jazz, whether it's blues or whatever, having this kind of control over your phrasing and trying to do interesting things is going to keep it interesting for you first and foremost, and therefore you're going to have a much more fun playing. If you're having much more fun playing, it's going to sound that way, and it's going to be more interesting to the people listening to it too. So there we are. I really hope you found this tutorial interesting, and I hope that you get something useful out of all the little bits of information that I've passed along today. You don't have to use it strictly as I've given it. Start to look at some of the scales that you already know and look for those repeating patterns within them. Employ the same techniques to those, and you might come up with some very interesting shapes, patterns, sounds, tonalities, chords, all that kind of stuff. So don't forget to return to leewrathe.com to get in touch. Let me know what you thought about the tutorial. Leave me a review, that really does help. And if you've got any suggestions for new tutorials, please do get in touch and I'll look to make those too. You can get in touch with me here, but I'm also on Facebook and YouTube as well, so go and say hello to me there. And on Instagram and Twitter too. So lots of ways to get in touch and let me know what you think about the tutorial and just to say hello really. So hopefully I'll speak to you soon. Until then, take care.